Hi, and welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. We took a little break last week, mainly because I was a bit under the weather, but today I think I'm ready to talk to you again. If my voice sounds a little crazy, that's what's going on. So this video on binding the modern Dresden wall hanging project that we've been working on, the star of our show, and talk about the finale, my overall impressions with this project, the things that I think I would do differently if I were to do it again, and the things that I'm super pleased about and happy that we were here together to experience this. So here we go with binding first. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Hi, so glad you could come back. I wanted to talk to you today about modern Dresden, and I'm calling this project done. I do have a few little things to finish up on, but I didn't want you to have to wait on me. So today we're going to talk about the things I've done since our last video and the couple of things I still need to do. This, as you recall, was our experiment to join a very traditional Dresden plate block with some very vibrant colors that kind of brought a modern feel to this particular quilt top. And we chose this ocean blue and this very vibrant, almost a lime green as our color. And then we chose a black and white fat quarter bundle as the fabrics for the Dresdens. So let's take it apart, figuratively, not literally, and talk about it. Okay, so here we go. We created the Dresden plates with the fat quarter block, and as you recall, there's 16 blades in each block, and we took 4 of these blades and we put the points on it, and the rest of them were the round top blades. So we learned a technique in this particular series of videos about how to create those rounded top Dresden blades, and that was very interesting. I think if you're looking for something fast and easy, I would go with the pointed blades. But if you're looking for something a little more traditional, then try out those rounded tops. We also talked a little bit about how to fit them together. And if you need to adjust them, the place to adjust them is the inner circle of the plates. So we took these plates and we put them on the colored blocks. And then we used the alternating color in the center of the circle. And I thought this looked great when we put it together. From there, we added the checkerboard border. I love the way it looks, but I may never do another one again because they're kind of finicky and they're really small. It looks great from a distance, and most of the squares look good up close, but it was a pain to keep them even in the way they're spaced and to make sure they fit appropriately. It will challenge your quilting ability. I say your quilting ability, not your quilting ability, but your construction ability, and you're being able to sew even squares. That being said, I still do like it an awful lot, and I think it's exactly what this quilt needed. Okay, since the last time we met, what have I done? Well, I've quilted around each one of the circles. I've quilted around the entire 4 blocks with a line of stitches right here that you can see. And I started quilting between the blocks. Now, I had a choice to make. I could either choose to sew it right next to the seam, but then I would have to decide, did I want the stitching in the blue block or the green block? Or did I want to put 2 rows of stitches in? Well, I certainly don't want to put 2 rows of stitches in. So I decided to do something very different. I started sewing actually in the seam. The stitches fall right where those two colors come together. And you might be able to see from our overhead camera there exactly what I'm talking about. That's difficult. It's very time consuming. You want to make sure that you pull it hard enough so that the stitch is even, but you don't want to pull it so hard that the stitch just falls completely down in that seam and it's invisible. So that's how much quilting I got done. I got one of these. I need to do the other three. And I think the other thing that I probably will do is I will come back in here and do another row of stitches just on the checkerboard inside the binding. Now, I put a 1/2 inch binding on this quilt because I thought it needed something, but it needed to be small and just a little decoration, if you will, to finish up the edges. So it's about a 1/2 inch wide, and this is a straight of grain binding. It is a single fold. So what that means is I had a 2-inch strip of fabric that I cut long enough to go all the way around. I sewed the pieces together at a 45-degree angle to minimize the bulk in this. And there's one right here, and it just is very, very slightly more thick than the rest of it. And I sewed this strip of fabric on. Well, yeah, I was going to sew around the whole thing before I even started with the border, but I decided not to do that. What I did is I placed the edge of this fabric at the edge of the checkerboard border, and I sewed a 1/4 inch seam in. And then I allowed the batting and the backing to be just a smidgen larger than that, probably 1/8 of an inch. And then I trimmed it. Actually, I trimmed it before, but I sewed the front on by machine, so I knew I had a nice even line of stitches going down. And because I sewed it with black thread on the back side, I had a nice seam that I could use to measure where to fold that binding over and stitch to. So I folded the binding over, folded it in on itself right back up to the edge of the batting, and then stitched it along that seam from putting it on the front. Fold over, single fold binding. And then all of this is stitched by hand. You can't see the stitches, but they are there if you look hard enough for them. So it gives it a nice presentation about being very finished and very neat looking. So let me tell you briefly the things about this quilt wall hanging that I really like and the things I don't like, and what I'm going to do with it from here. First of all, I need to finish up the stitching that I talked about. I don't particularly care for how puffy this is in here. And I think perhaps what I'm going to do is come back in and do a single echo around the plate. And because there are lots of curves and points, that's going to take a while. And I didn't want you to have to wait a couple of weeks for me to do that. So then I'll see how it looks and what I think. If it needs more stitching, I may run some diagonal lines in the corners to secure that. Part of the problem now is that, and I think the problem is driven by the checkerboard, because trying to get that checkerboard the exact right size of the 4 squares was problematic. You know, it's 25 inches, but 25 inches with fabric sometimes is 24 3/4, and sometimes it's 25 1/4. So I think that these pieces were a little longer, so to speak, than the actual checkerboard. So when the checkerboard then relaxed itself, it kind of drew in a little bit, and that's why you've got the little puffiness. So I think a little bit of extra quilting will really help on that. And the extra quilting here on the edge will just look nice, I think. If that still does not solve the problem of it being puffy, then I may look into a second echo a little further out to try to draw some of that in. So, because I think that once we do a little more quilting in the blocks, that will either fix the problem, because you know we had a similar thing here, or it will make it less noticeable. But I hope you will agree that this is a striking color combination, and it represents a lot of work, a lot of new techniques, a lot of things that I learned, and I hope that you learned a little something with it. This is intended to be a wall hanging. I don't really anticipate that we're going to be washing it too much. As I recall, we did pre-wash everything on here with the exception of the back. And because it's a wall hanging, if something were to happen and the backing take on some of the colors, the black, the blues, the greens, that's not going to really be a problem because it's going to be hanging up against a wall. So I wasn't too concerned about that. But overall, I'm very happy with it. I think it is quite, like I said, quite a striking quilt top. And it certainly has the potential to look even better if we can get this kind of puffiness, as it were, out of it. I did use a warm and white back batting, which I always find is very forgiving. It doesn't require stitching quite so close together. And because we're not going to be washing this a lot, that's not even really that much of a concern. But once we do the echo, I think we will be generally within the scope of what they would like for you to quilt, with the possible exception of here in the borders. But very happy with it. If you have missed any of the videos on this project and you would like to go back and see how we put it together step by step, check out the playlist. I know sometimes people come along to see these and they end up catching the very last video of a series and they're lost. They don't know, what's happened before they got there. So those playlists are really great to be able to take you through the whole project from start to finish. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to grow our analytics a little bit so we can get in a better place to have YouTube promote our video a little bit more and expose what's on the channel to a broader audience. So we would really appreciate that. I thank you so much for joining with us. Be sure to check out the other videos on our channel, and we will see you next time here at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Have a great day. Here we are, and we've got it down. And like I said before, we do have the white on the reverse as the backing. And you can really see the quilting very well on the back, especially the echo quilting in the Dresden plates, and then also the square up here. I do notice, we got a little loose string there. I do notice that this line of stitches coming down the middle that goes in the ditch, of all the stitches, that's the craziest looking one on the back, because it is a straight line and you're anticipating that the stitches are going to be completely straight. And because of the way I stitch, they're kind of all wonky. Some of them are straight and some of them have a bit of an angle to them. And of course there's some variance in the stitch length as well, which is not necessarily unexpected in what I look for. Usually the backing of the quilt is much larger, so you have many more stitches and that little variance in your stitch doesn't show up as much, or it's not as noticeable. And then from the front, when I get this one lined up, you can see, here we go, a little bit of the stitching there, can see the stitch around the circle and the echoing, and then along the lines here of the block itself and the stitches here on the edge. And I'm going to bring that up a bit so you might get a really good look at it. Just a little bit. There we go. And all the way around. There is a 1/2 inch binding on the edge of this quilt, this project. And see, there's a little thing we need to tuck in. See, this might work okay. And I think that's just from sewing that binding on. It's got a loose thread. And we should be able to tuck that right in. I find sometimes that a really small crochet hook is good for this because you can put that crochet hook in place and then grab a hold of that thread and just pull it right in. There we go. That was easy enough. Sometimes one of your white marking pencils is really good when you're dealing with white fabric too, because you've got a smooth point on the edge of it and you can just poke it right where you need to go if you're going underneath a layer of fabric. But you can see here, there's the little stitching right on the edge, which is this stitching here. Now, the way that I put this on was that I machine stitched the binding to the front. You can kind of see there. Rolled it over and then hand stitched it on the back. I do always prefer to hand stitch my binding down. That's my favorite type of hand stitching. I enjoy that more than hand quilting. So that always is very relaxing to me to do, and the satisfaction in getting that binding on and finished is always a pleasure as well. But that's our project. Look at that. It's just really pretty, I think, and quite different from some of the projects that we've done before. For example, something more traditional like the Star Surround that came from one of the magazines. This is my adaptation of a published pattern. It's quite different from the more traditional applique piece that we see in Miss Kelly. Different from something like the Blue Star project that we've done, or even some of the other small items that we've covered here on the channel so far. Very bright, very modern, a little bit of British influence maybe. The Mary Engelbrekt, I think I mentioned that as well. She uses that in some of her illustrations, the black and white checkerboard. This particular pattern or collection of fabrics would be equally welcome for boys, girls, adults, babies even. You know, they say babies are stimulated by the contrast in colors much earlier than they are with colors, so that bright black and white would really be very interesting as a nursery color scheme or pattern scheme for that. Anyway, I think this wraps up the project. In a nutshell, I'm not going to rush out and do another 1-inch checkerboard border or anything right now with a checkerboard, because that was the most difficult part of this process. And I think I've had enough Dresden plates to last for a while. It'll be probably a couple of months before we see anything like that again. I enjoyed the colors immensely. I enjoyed the contrast between the fabrics and the patterns. And overall, I'm very happy with this. I think in the process of looking through these, and if you're interested in this and you've missed our videos, you can always go back to the playlist and see every video in this project and see how we took this from a pile of fabrics, the tools we use to get it into this particular project. Very happy with it, and I hope you have enjoyed this as well. If you've liked this project and some of the videos that I've given on this, give us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to the channel. And I'm off to start a new project today, so we'll see you next time at the Shamrock Quilt Studio.